Yeah, it'll be perfect. So what I've already recorded, and I think mine's recording. Yeah, it's recording. Okay. I've already made an intro for my podcast. So
Okay.
basically it's I went through all your guys' intro. So I'm basically like, hey, we've got, special guest this month on the podcast, brother Kory, brother LeRoy, and I kind of go through, and at the very end of it, I basically say, what's up, guys? And then like we'll kind of like dive in from there. So I figured like, because obviously you're going to edit this, edit it out or whatever. So we can just do it like record it like as if it was uh how Green Grind would record it. So like kick it off like, hey, we're going to switch it up this month. We're going to have, Sam interviewing us. And then at some point I'll just be like, what's going on, guys? And then we'll just take it over. So then it's your guys' podcast, but then I'll just have a separate intro and then I'll have a separate outro, which I'll record separately too. So yeah.
Sure.
Or
So
we
you
can
want us
even,
to record our
So we'll do our intro and we'll
Okay.
say
yep.
we'll tell our audience what's going on, and then as soon as you say, "Hey guys," that'll be where you'll cut in on your
Yep.
recording. That makes
That's
sense.
perfect. That'll be easy. And then at the end, I don't know if we want to just record it right in the outro. How do you guys end your like when we get to the final question? How do you guys normally end Green Grind?
We typically, we'll ask. We have our final question, which we won't do today, but then we say, "Hey, how can our guests find you, Sam? How do they get a hold of you?" And do that, and then we say, "Hey guys, we drop a new episode of the Green Grind every Tuesday." I just do a little quick outro like that, and then we dump it right there.
Okay, gotcha. So I'll
But it
I'll
doesn't have to
just
be exactly the same.
no,
This
yeah,
one's
you can do yours, and then obviously do you guys edit that part there, or do you guys try to have the podcast to not have to be edited, or does she edit right through the whole thing, or is it just the opening and closing kind of edit?
not much editing at all, really. Mainly just put in any promotional ads that we have that we're getting paid for. So any sponsor ads, and that's really it. And then Kaz builds the promo out that we drop the night before and the morning of. But we don't do any editing really. I mean, unless something gets goofy, but rarely, or if it cuts off, we lost power midway. But so
Got it.
we'll make it work. This will be good either way, and I'm not worried about it. And our audience, I think will enjoy the podcast enough that it doesn't. I
Oh, they're
think
gonna
sometimes
love
I
it.
think it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, so what I'll do is we'll end it the way you would end it, and then what I'll do is just I'll have my editor cut that off and then just put, man, if that added value to you, and I'll just kind of do a closer and I'll just say thanks guys, for joining, and then I'll record that separately. So we're good.
Perfect.
So
All right,
Awesome.
let's
Perfect.
get this thing rocking. So let's do our intro, Leroy, and then we'll introduce Sam, and then we'll rock and get this thing rocking.
let's
Awesome.
go.
Let's do it. Welcome to the Green Grind Podcast, where we discuss real experience, real struggles, and real business. My name is Leroy Maines. I'm with Brilliant Borders Landscaping, and we have Kory Ballard, who's the founder of Perfect Cut Site Management and Ballard Innovative Products. As always, we have Kaz, who's the brains of this thing, getting it from our mouth to your ears and eyes. Just a friendly reminder that the Green Grind is sponsored by Jobber and ProTiv. And welcome back to the Green Grind, guys. Today we are talking again with Sam Gembel. Sam has been on our show 2-3 times now. I believe this is our third time, maybe, Kory?
Yeah, we were trying to get him maybe like quarterly, and Sam always drops a ton of information.
Awesome.
Sam, you're the easiest guest ever because he just
He says, yeah, it's everything.
and then he says he's in, and then he just tells these awesome stories and talks about how he runs his company
Love it.
and shares a ton of information. So, but we're doing something kind of different. So I'll just throw that out there. Sam's going to also record. He's recording this at the same time, so it's going to be on his podcast, and we'll tell you how to get to that later on in our podcast. So kind of a dual episode, which is something new. We were trying to bounce around some ideas of how do we change it up and not just interview him. So I think he's going to be interviewing us. So we're going to mix it up today. So Sam, super happy to have you back on the podcast.
I am excited to be here with you guys. Always an honor, and you guys make it easy as well, because I think between the three of us, there's so many different experiences that we've been through. And so I'm excited to kick it off with this episode here for Green Grind and also for Cultureproof. So let's go.
Outstanding. Where are we starting this thing, fellas? What
Sam, it's
what do
your
you
show,
think?
Sam.
Oh my gosh, you guys are making it easy. All right. Well, I will first and foremost, how are you guys doing?
Doing good, buddy. Doing good. I'm not sure when this will air, but business is good. Life is good. We're having a good fall. I love this time of year. So other than my football team not being very good, well, really, my team's better than Leroy's.
My team's horrible. How do you have arguably the best quarterback and best wide receiver duo in the entire NFL and probably not going to make the playoff.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
I looked at payroll last night because I thought the Cowboys were up there for some reason. Actually, the Cowboys aren't even in the top 10, but the Bengals are fourth.
Yeah.
You know who's first? The Cleveland Browns, which I never would have
John
thought. Watson. But so I looked at it, and but your Lions are tough. They should have lost last night. Now this is going to be late, but so they're 9-1. But when I fell asleep, the Texans were beating up on them, and I woke up and I checked, and I'm like, shit.
Oh yeah, my 11-year-old son actually came and woke me and my wife up to go, Mom, Dad, the Lions won. I'm like, what time is it, Gabe? And so I could not believe it. So when I got up this morning, I'm big on my getting up early routine, and I walk in the living room and my son is using the top cushion of the couch as a pillow, and he's kind of laid out like on his stomach. He must have, I'm pretty sure he sleptwalked in to let us know that the Lions won, but I took him to his first game now a few months ago, and he had been a Lions fan, but like, dude, Ford Field will change you when you get to experience those games in person. And dude, he's all in now, man. Like knows every player and knows where they're from. It's pretty cool to see my 11-year-old being all in like that. So we'll see where it goes, man.
I took my kids to a Vikings game. We're lifelong Vikings fans, and my son liked the Vikings, but same deal. Took him to them. My buddy has a suite on the field, so we're literally standing on the field that they're playing on. Players were coming over and autographing, and he's just like, it totally changed his perspective. Like I think it just feels more real, and he gets to quite a few games as well, and gets to see his team suck it. But It is cool though, and it's fun for them to see. I think it just changes it. It's like when you watch on TV, it's like, it's pretty cool, and then you go there and you're like, just the energy and the magic, and pretty cool.
It does, but the one thing, Sam, and you'll figure this out. Once your team is good, and then they go back to sucking, it sucks.
Yeah, I can see that.
It is not fun. It's so much more fun.
Yeah, because like for the Lions, you guys have sucked so long that it's like every game is like a new birth, and the teams, I love the way it's coached and the way they play, and it's fun. And the Vikings are just always just good enough to break your heart. So it's just like, we're just like a playoff. We're just an 8-8 playoff team out the first round. And it's so you just kind of get what you get.
Yeah.
We raised both of our kids up to where they're at now, kind of both being Lions fans, which I'm pretty sure is borderline child abuse. Not 100%, but I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, it's definitely, we're going to ride it as long as we can. I mean, look at Michigan and what the Wolverines did. And now, man, do they leave a lot to be desired. But we are, we're kind of Vikings fans in the Gimbel household as well because of JJ McCarthy joining your guys' team. So we're excited to see, hopefully he can, get himself off the bench there with his injury and
for sure
add some value to the team. So, but
let's add some value to the lawn care industry.
Thinking about leadership and, stepping out of your comfort zone and all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. The Lions are a prime example of what can happen, with changing leadership and just, putting more of an emphasis on the team and, different metrics and look at what's happening with the Lions now, right? So, I mean, I think that's a good segue into our episode. So to kick things off, when you guys were, inviting me onto this episode, and we kind of didn't really have we didn't have an agenda. We didn't have, what normally we don't, right? It's kind of we just jump in, we start answering some questions, and that's what happens when people, that want others to grow get together. It kind of just rolls, right? And it ends up being some of the best episodes that other people have watched from Green Grind. And so I'm kind of like, we talked about doing this episode, and I'm going through all of my emails and going through like the different questions that I get from lawn and landscape owners, all over North America. And I notice a trend. Whenever you jump on Zoom calls or when we public speak or do masterminds, you notice that so many people, they're just in that comfort zone and they don't know, like they get comfortable. And one of the things that I've learned from certain points in my journey being comfortable is that when we are comfortable, we just get stupid. We make dumb decisions. We tend to think and act with our emotions versus what the next right thing should be. And so when I'm thinking like, what would be a great episode with in my opinion, two of the best leaders that I know, let's talk about stepping out of your comfort zone. And so, thinking about that, so hopefully it doesn't catch you guys too far off guard there, but I know you guys know a little bit with stepping out of your comfort zone. So does that sound cool to you guys? Does that seem like something that you, we can embark on? No pressure, no pressure. But why don't we kick things off? Just thinking about in our industry, and one of the things that is the trends. You guys have heard me talk a lot about the 80-15-5 principle, which is essentially 80% of the companies in our industry, they do just enough to survive. It's the owner chucking his truck, owner operated. Maybe they've got a second crew or maybe a second employee, but 80% of the companies in our industry really will never make it past that $500,000 to $750,000 revenue point. When you step up to the 15% of landscape companies, which puts right around that $1 million to $2 million revenue point, so that makes up about 15% of our industry. When you start to break past the $3 million revenue point up to like the $5 million revenue point, that represents less than 5% of the companies in our industry. And a little fun fact with that, of that 5%, less than 3% will actually make it past the $5 million revenue point. And I have been studying on this for the last year, just to try to get, our aspiring lawn and landscape companies, just how do they get past that point of growth, at least to get them into that 15% group. I think that's just like the perfect size small business. And one of the things when you start asking questions to these entrepreneurs or lawntrepreneurs, as our friend Brian would call them, you notice their answers are just things that they're in this comfortable point. They hire an employee, things don't quite work out, they let them go, and then they go right back to working in the company again because that's just what they're comfortable with. And until they step out of that comfort zone, you guys know, and I know that they're never going to get to that next level. So to kick things off, why don't you guys kind of share something of what it looked like when you were growing your landscape companies, what it looked like to kind of operate in your comfort zone? And then, how did you kind of step out of that? Leroy, why don't you kick things off?
Sure. Thanks for the awesome intro there, Sam. And I think it's fantastic that we're going to talk about this a little bit, because I agree with you. And we've talked about it before, that those that 80%. The question is always, and I think we get it, Kory. How do you grow? How do you grow your company?
Right.
And what's that?
And why do you want to grow it? Obviously,
and you hit it right on the head. And the reason I think people don't is just because they are in that comfort zone so much. And I think back to when we first started, or when I first started, I guess I should say. I was in a comfort zone of a couple of reasons. One, I started this just kind of part-time on the side. My wife had owned it when I married her, but I just did this part-time, nights, weekends, those things going forward. And that was extremely comfortable because I didn't have to be all in at the point. And that was, so that was pretty comfortable with what we were doing. I think one of the biggest things that we did, and a lot of guys do, is they just get so narrowed in the services that they are offering and not willing to step out and try something new a lot of times. And that was certainly the case with us. We started Brilliant Borders, being the decorative concrete borders is what our company initially started with. And it was so difficult for me to get out of that we're Brilliant Borders. This is what we do. We only do the concrete edging. And had I stayed in that mindset, it just would have been a mess. But just, honing in on that one service was detrimental to us, I believe, in the beginning, and not being a little more open-minded. One of our other huge comfort zones, I believe, in the early on was matching rates and just charging lower rates, thinking we would probably secure a little bit more work. We're just not quite as good as the big guys. We're not, as you said, Sam, we're not in that 15 percentile yet, or the top 5, that top 20%, even close to that stuff. And so we're not as good as those guys. We don't have as much to offer. And so we'll just keep our rates a little bit lower. And that mindset, just thinking, if we're at the bottom here, we'll secure more work and that'll keep our company going. And that just obviously is a problem for us. And then, we lacked at the beginning a business identity, just not knowing who we were, what we were doing, other than just being out there trying to make a buck or two here and there. And then probably the biggest thing was, and you mentioned this earlier, Sam, is trying to grow a company just a little bit. I had my hand in everything,
Right.
absolutely everything. Every single day, I knew exactly what was going on, who was where, who was doing what, and it was so comfortable just knowing
Yep.
everything that was going on in my company and having to be in that thing. And for lack of a better word, the control freak that I am, that was comfortable to me knowing exactly what's going on. Because if I could control everything that was going on, the chances of me going under and having my family have to go live in a van down by the river got much, much smaller. And that's the way my mind goes. I'm an all or nothing guy. If we're not going to do this, we're going to burn it to the ground and off we go. And so having my hand in everything was extremely detrimental looking back on things. And that
we
was a
went, we
huge.
went we went almost 5 or 6 years before we were comfortable raising prices, and
Mhm.
even then we weren't comfortable. Like, that was, we raised prices because we had to. And I remembered when I had hired, or I didn't hire, I empowered my first person to start selling, in addition from me being the sales guy. And I remembered it was always like, where did you come up with the prices for that? Where did that number come from? And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, I sold that on that landscape project or whatever on a payroll week. So that deposit we got, that paid payroll. So, when you look back at it now, you're like, that was what we were comfortable doing, but it's just not my favorite word, which is scalable. It might work at the point where you're at, but thinking of the different production rates, depending on who's doing the work, everything changes. And so, man, that's just that's a powerful thing. Like, having your hand on everything. Now, looking back at it, that sounds so uncomfortable. But at that point in the journey, it's what you knew, right? It's what letting go of stuff is one of the hardest things there. So, Kory, you know what, Kory? Why don't you, same thing for you? Let's talk
Yeah,
about
I mean,
when you went from high school with Perfect
yeah.
Cup kind of just getting going. Then you went from high school being the guy that's out there, you're doing the work, you're collecting the money, you're selling it, you're sharpening the blades, you're doing a little bit of everything there. How do you remember kind of looking back at the journey when you kind of stepped out and stepped into more of a, looking at it from an entrepreneurial perspective versus the owner operator perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'm never comfortable. That's one thing that I think
Amen.
maybe is one of the things that's helped me grow. And if you guys have know Matt Bowman, my business partner, Matt was like, I was the motivational guy. I was the inspiration. I had confidence even when I maybe didn't deserve to have confidence. So I think that always worked for me. So I never was complacent in my business, which and even today I'm like Leroy, I'm thinking if we don't have a good month, shit, we might have to shut this thing. We got to shut this thing down. And
Oh
that's just
yeah.
the truth, right? Um, you know, so in the beginning of our business, one of the things that I think was part of the magic is I was working in the field and everybody knew me and trusted me, and I was working side by side and I had dirt on my hands just like they did all day and every day. And one of the things that happens to small businesses is as I pulled myself out of the field, I remember even people asking me like, what do you mean you're not going to go on a mowing crew? Maybe we had
Mm.
2 or 3 mowing crews at this point. And I'm like, guys, I can't be in the field. I've literally got to do estimates and I'm getting our routes ready. And I was doing the billing. This was pre-hiring our first even admin person. And I remember some of my, I want to call them buddies because I worked side by side with them. We'd all meet at Godfather's Pizza for lunch. All three mowing crews would meet at the same place and have lunch together. And we worked till dark together. And they're like, "What are you going to do all day?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm going to run the business." It was tough. But they respected me enough back then that they knew I was a hard worker and I wasn't like I was going to the lake, boating and fishing and riding a motorcycle around. They knew that
Yep.
I was going to focus on the business. And but as we grew and hired new people, there was a little. I quickly noticed that they didn't care what Kory used to do. Like they would
Yeah.
be like, "You don't know, it's 95 degrees." I'm like, "Joe, I was out there, man. I worked like I ran a mowing crew like my." But I mean, at this point, I was a young guy, still 22, 23 years old. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
I was just extremely confident and excited all the time. And I say this a lot to business owners, like I didn't get to have a bad day. I didn't get it. And I had bad days, but I never showed that we were having a bad day. I never showed that I was stressed about payroll.
Yep.
I never showed that I was, holy shit, like if we don't get some more accounts, I'm not sure how we're going to, how this is going to work. And so
Mm.
I think I was always just extremely motivated. And that kept me from really getting complacent. And, Leroy mentioned his name. Imagine naming your company Perfect Cut.
Sure.
I mean, people didn't know if we cut hair, cut grass. And numerous times I thought, boy, we got to change the name, and that was, we're not going to get off topic on that, but numerous times I thought, how are we going to grow this company and scale it into something big that offers full service with a company like Perfect Cut? And I've mentioned on the podcast numerous times, I wanted to change the name, but by the time I wanted to change the name, we had like 75 people, and it was
too much. Yeah, too late.
I think I brought it to my team, and I talked to everybody, and they're like, "No way, like we can't do it." So,
and who would have thought? Who would have thought the big plans God had for that business nowadays with that name? That is it a barber shop? Is it is it a dog groomer? Who would have thought that you'd be where?
And I would have to say this, guys, all the time. And I still, to this day, I literally just was at the gym today, and a guy asked me about my company, which I don't own anymore. And he knew it, but I still always say, the blue trucks. And as soon as I say the blue trucks, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know. But sometimes I'll say, I'll talk to somebody that like, aren't you that lawn care guy? Or you do lawn care? I'm like, yeah, Perfect Cut. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I said the blue trucks, like, oh yeah, I know the blue trucks.
So many
branding
people,
was the trucks.
Yep. So many people overthink that name. Like they overthink the name itself, that, if I don't have a name that sounds like Stripes Lawn Care or whatever it is, they think that people are going to not know what it is that they're doing. But a brand is a brand. I mean, once you start to build it, like you said, the blue trucks were the thing that everybody knew. And you just unpack so many things there, talking about, like how you're never comfortable. You approach each and every day like somebody's trying to come and steal your business from you, because they are. Right. So we should always, never have that complacent mindset. And then you mentioned something there about, never telling your team the problem that you were dealing, the problems that you were dealing with. And, when I think back to the journey, for Atlas, like I think everything changed when I realized that I didn't need to go at it alone. Like I thought if I didn't have all the answers to everything, that people would look at me like I was failing. But then when they realized that, hey, you know what, maybe we can add value back to the business, we can help. And it changed everything, just kind of being more vulnerable and transparent with things. And man, that's so much gold there. But to get back to it, let's go, Kory, let's keep it with you here. As Perfect Cut was growing, do you remember like the specific moment? I know you said that you're never comfortable, but do you remember like a specific moment where it was like the hardest, like, oh my gosh, the hardest thing that you had to do as a leader, kind of growing Perfect Cut? Like, let's think back to, let's say you're 750 to 1.5 million. So you're kind of approaching, and back, when you're growing, this is, you were one of the early adopters of the industry there, growing what I would consider a 5% company. But do you remember like your first pivotal moment during the growth year where you had to step out of your comfort zone, and what was going on that kind of prompted you to have to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it goes back to people, and I when I had to really start reprimanding, writing up, firing people that, man, I considered friends. I drank beer with them. We went hunting. I've mentioned numerous times. I was in guys' weddings. I mean, I literally had to let a guy go. I was in his wedding. I had to let a guy go. I was his best man twice. He got on it, first marriage and second marriage. Amazing. And I had to let him go. So for me, that's when it became less fun. And I realized, what is my responsibility as a leader? And I had to start really separating myself. And I still didn't do a good job of this, guys, until many years later, where I really had somebody come to me. We had hired an incredible CFO out of Nashville, and she came to me and said, you gotta stop, Kory. Like, these people are not your friends. Like, she was kind of more black and white. Like, you got it. Like, you're the leader of the company, you and Matt, and you're drinking beer with these people, and they think you're buddies. And so for me, I think back at the smaller point, though, was when I really had to sit down with people. And I'll tell you guys this, and everybody listening, this is kind of crazy. I even had some off the record meetings with people. Like, I remember a guy who unfortunately passed away, but I pulled him aside and I said, Stu, and he ran our irrigation department. And I said, Stu, you're putting me in a really uncomfortable position. I'm going to be forced to make a change. And he's like, oh, shit, and we're not doing nothing. You're not making a change. I'm like, Stu, this is off the record. I have to protect the whole here. And I'm starting to look bad by the way you're acting. Unfortunately, he had a substance abuse problem. So he was drinking and it was affecting other people. And so I'm looking weak as a leader by not doing something about this to protect the entire company. And I said, you're putting me in a really uncomfortable position. And I'm just telling you, as your friend, not as your boss, I will have to make a change. And when I finally did, probably was maybe 6 months or a year later, I literally sat him down. I just looked at him and said, like, hey, bud, like, you know what we're doing, right? And he's like, what? I'm like, you know what we're doing. Like, we had that. And I just looked at him. He started crying. He's like, what about my kids? And I'm like, dude, we had this conversation on the record and off the record, because we had several meetings with Matt and I and him, and sat him down, and I put him through treatment even, which is a little bit too much information, but I was so committed to my team. But just there were several people that unfortunately put me in a really tough position. And that's when I realized that my role was no longer to be their friend. And that was tough.
And and talking to the people that are in like the 80% grouping that are kind of getting their first couple of employees, when you're at that size, you have to do what you have to do to get people to buy into the vision, because you are the vision. You're the person that they're looking at. You haven't established a brand that is strong enough to start to separate yourself from that brand. Like when I think back to those first couple years of really, really hard decisions, I think you nailed it. Like every party, like I would invite some of my main team members to my kids' birthday parties, thinking like if I don't, they would feel awkward. But we're talking, we've got 50, 60 employees. So at this point, so now people are kind of like, it was just growing way too much. And I remembered my mentor at the time, still a mentor of mine today. I remember him saying, he's like, Sam, you're going to learn that like you have to separate yourself. But speaking to the guy or to the girl or whatever that's in that more of the 80 percentile, less than $1 million revenue, like you need to keep a pulse on things right now as you're building the brand, because that's all you got right now. But as you evolve, that will be the thing that will hold you back. So anyway,
just say something real quick on there. That was also part of our magic. And I know as screwed up as it was, part of our magic was everybody loved Perfect Cut. Everybody loved hanging out with Kory and Matt, and we drank beer and we had fun after work on a Friday night. I'd hand somebody $40 and they'd run to the gas station and pick up a couple cases of beer, and we'd bring the mowers in and we'd all get underneath them and scrape the decks real quick. And everybody that was part of our magic, and everybody loved working there. Mm-hmm. But that changes, and that was maybe at $1 million or $2 million, and then probably bigger than we should have been. But then it starts to change, and that's when it really got rough for a while. Where it's like, I like the old Perfect Cut, and like, yeah, that doesn't. We don't drink beer anymore at work, bud. Like, sorry, like we don't do that anymore here.
Grow up.
We have to grow up.
What worked to get you there won't keep you there. And I'm seeing that right now, even with my team, right around the 10 mil mark. I'm seeing that my senior leaders are being challenged on a different level. Yep. And it's pushing them out of their comfort zone big time. And so we're going through a lot of pivotal growth moments, and it hurts. We opened the second location, and there's just a lot of stuff going on there. So you know what? Like I love, as a leader, it's our job to always keep tension. I think it's a healthy tension, because then it keeps people from getting complacent. But LeRoy, what about you? Same question. What's your thoughts on that? Or do you have that moment that you remember going through Brilliant Borders, when you went all in with the business, and now you've evolved into an incredible company? Same thing for you.
Thanks. Yeah. Again, it was the people. And I've talked about my guy Armando a couple of times on this show, and I'll never forget the day where he actually walked in with his brother Sergio at the time, and they both walked in the door, and they were hardscape guys, and we were at a pivotal moment in Brilliant Borders at the time, to where the hardscape guy we had, he'd hit we took him to the ceiling he was going to, and that was just it. And looking back, that was actually me at that point, but he was just going no further with our company and couldn't go anywhere, and we had hardscape projects that we had to get done, and these two guys walk in our door, and they needed $20, and that was $20 an hour, and that was 9 years ago.
And you're like,
And I'm like,
$9. What?
yeah. And I'm like, I'm thinking 14 to 15 bucks an hour. You know,
20's kind of
that's what
bonkers.
and 20 was just a huge, complete reach for me. And I'm like, I was like, all right, well, let me get back to you tomorrow. I talked a little bit to him and, called around a little bit. And these are the guys that, these guys can do stuff. They'd worked at Perfect Cut. They'd worked at another big company out west. They'd worked at, a few different places in town and just hadn't found a home yet for whatever reason. And so, I talked about it a little bit with my wife and decided, yeah, let's do this. And from that day forward, we took off, and Armando is still with us today and is a leader for us and just a phenomenal leader for us. But what that did for me is I'm like, we got to do something here because I can't. First of all, my pricing was wrong. As I said earlier, our pricing wasn't right. So we
couldn't afford the $20 an hour guy because you weren't charging.
We weren't priced right. We were just priced whatever we could because we were in our comfort zone of just kind of piddling around and doing it. And so we had to get like very serious at the time and like, okay, how are we going to get more business? Because if we don't get more business, these guys are going to be out the door for one thing. Mm-hmm. And then first of all, and that was the first time too that I'd hired somebody that knew more than me. And so that was way the hell out of my comfort zone at that point. He knew, he didn't know more about the business, but he knew more about building patios and how to build retaining walls and how to build outdoor kitchens, all those different types of things. And so when he's telling me this, kind of like you said, Sam, how did you build that? Why did we do it for this price? We're losing money on this stuff, challenging me on stuff, that completely sent us out of our comfort zone. But when we hired those guys, that made us be better than we were. And I think we had to be better than we were at that point. And we had to continue to push our business. And that took me way, way, way out of my comfort zone hiring those guys at that price.
The thing is as senior leaders, we need people that are wanting to level up because them wanting to grow forces us to grow. Because if the people that are coming up behind us are not wanting more out of their life and leadership, the problem is it's really easy for us kind of as the day-to-day, the senior rainmakers, chief problem solver, whatever you want to call ourselves. It would be really, really easy to get complacent when you're at a point now where like the people that are up and coming, you've outpaced them so far that there's no chance for them to be able to catch you. So I love, like you nailed it, LeRoy, with saying you hired a person that knew more than you about a certain thing, and that's our job as the leaders. It's not our job to try to like motivate people. It's our job to direct motivated people. So you bring that person on that knows more than we know about a certain thing. You just create the vision, point them in the right direction, give them opportunity to grow, and then get the heck out of the way and then watch, where that goes. So there's so many people are going to resonate with that. So many people
said too, when we hit, one of the things we do now is we interview our guys one-on-one. I do that personally and ask them, what are you looking for out of us?
You will outgrow that system someday. Sorry, go ahead, carry on.
And I hope we do soon, because what it does is it tells, okay, this guy wants to be a sales guy. This guy wants to do this. He wants to get into the design piece. So I'm like, that, as you just said, Sam, that pushes me further to direct our company and to continue to make things bigger so I can create opportunities, because these guys are studs.
Right. They want more. They want more. Yep.
Yeah. And if I don't give them more, somebody will.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember when we were hiring people too, and I to just throw this in there, like, I remember having these tough conversations when people started getting to prices that we thought we couldn't afford. Like, I remember back in the day, like, trying to hire someone like he needs $60,000 a year. I'm like, holy shit. Like, right. I'm not even sure I don't think I was paying myself that at the time. And I always thought to myself, like, what do we have to lose? Like, and Matt and I'd have those tough conversations, and I made most of the hiring decisions back then, but I'd like, what if they don't work out? What if they work here for 3 months and they're not great? I'll just let them go. Like, it's not the end of I'm not giving them ownership. Let them go see. And I can't think of a single time when one of those people that I thought was outside of my price range didn't earn every dollar that they were paid. They weren't that much better. And, we have that conversation. We, like, I can only afford 18, not 20. I'm like, but what if the guy for 20 is 30% better?
Oh yeah.
Better. What if he takes care of your truck and your equipment? What if he puts on a great face for your brand and company? What if he represents you well at the gas station and the convenience store and the McDonald's? And what if he's great at Little League and church? You're telling me he's now worth $2 or she? I'll pay that. Maybe it's worth, like, and so there's always that, like, I can only pay 18. I'm like, but what if you had a stud for 23?
Yeah.
Or,
Right.
guy or
And how do
gal.
you,
You can't make
and
whatever.
knowing if that person, is a stud without, you got to take those chances, and
Sometimes you got to take a chance.
you got to take a
And
chance on
people
it.
know their value. And I used to always say that, like, he wants 23 an hour. I'm like, you know why? Because he values himself or herself. He says, I'm the best hardscaper in town. Armando comes into Leroy and says, I want 20, not because he thought he was selfish, because he thinks I'm a kick-ass hardscaper and you're going to pay me 20 or someone else is.
Yep.
If
Yep.
he comes in and is like, I'll start for 12.
Whatever
worth?
you're paying your best guy, it's not enough.
Yep.
Whatever you're
You're right.
paying, like, it's not enough. Kory, I've heard you mention a few times, even in this episode here, and also just in many conversations that we've had, we talk a lot about how being comfortable can make us get complacent, right? You just think, like, because you've had this customer for so long, they're not going to go anywhere, or this guy's been on my team for so long, this guy's not going to quit. What else is he going to do? Has there ever been, and Kory, we'll start with you, has there ever been an experience where, staying comfortable with something like that kind of either hindered your growth or hindered your decision making?
For sure. Both of those are great examples. And I won't hit on the customers, but that too long, but that happens a lot, right? We're out here hunting and hunting and hunting. We got to get 12 new, we call them tier ones, which is a customer above 100,000. So it's a tier one and everyone has different, but hey, we've got this list of tier ones and we got to get 10 new ones. And so we're out hunting and taking people to lunch and whining and dining and showing them our best. But nobody's paying attention to the 15, tier ones over here that have been with us for 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. Yep. They're like, they're going to stay with us. So that has certainly hurt us. And then they put a cancel in and we're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And they're like, we haven't been happy all year, but no one's really checked on us. You guys are doing a pretty good job, but you guys used to check in, we had a monthly meeting that kind of subsided. And then we used to have a quarterly walkthrough and so that's happened. But more importantly, on the employee side, this happens all the time. It's the quiet people get overlooked. And then when they put their notice in, we're all just flabbergasted, right? We're like, man, I thought Jim and Nancy were happy.
Everything was fine. Everything was good.
She hasn't asked for a raise in 2 years. Well, but why? So should she have to ask for a raise? So where we really lost out was, and we've had so many conversations about this, I'm like, why are we not paying our people what they're worth or what we would pay to replace them? So if Jim quits tomorrow and he makes $20 an hour, and we're saying that if he quit tomorrow, but man, we'd pay somebody $30 to do what he does. I'm like, no, why aren't we paying Jim 30? So we'd pay somebody else who we don't know, don't trust, never been here, don't know anything about it. We'll pay that. We'll pay schmuck over here 30, but we'll pay Jim 20. Well, he hasn't asked for a raise. And so we really had to have some really tough conversations, and it cost our company a lot of money. So we started truing people up. We started going in and say, what does this position pay? And then what does it pay at the elite level for someone that's been here 4 years, Class A CDL, a perfect attendance. They're a leader in the parking lot. They're a leader in the field. If that job pays $26 an hour, why are we not paying Nancy $26 an hour? She's our lead floral designer or whatever the job, right?
Yep.
And so we lost some incredible people. And I should say this, we also saved some because they'll come in, and I'm sure you guys have both been there, and they put their notice in, and you're just like, whoa. Yeah. I mean, you're just like, you might as well just smash me with a 2x4. And then you're like, what's it going to take to stay? And sometimes you can save them, but most of the time they're like, Kory, I've accepted another job. I would have never left here without another job.
At that point, it's too late. If you go and try to reactively keep people, like, it never works out well. Too late. Never works out well.
Guys, I've actually paid $5,000 and $10,000 stay with us bonuses in fear, frustration, mostly fear. Let's go back. Fear. Like, holy shit, who's going to run? Like, you've been with us. Like, nobody else knows the tree department. You can't leave.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't fix the problem because at the root of it, we didn't take care of them or they weren't happy. So we threw some money at them. They go home to their wife and like, hey, Kory offered me $5,000 to stay. We could probably use that. They stay, but it didn't fix the problem. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. It does.
We did not do a great job of making sure we were taking care of the people on our team. We were hunting for the new customer. We were hunting for the new employee,
Yep.
We were not protecting the best customers we already had, and we were not protecting the best employees we already had.
I have so many stories that can relate to that. And I know so many other people will too, that we're going to fire away on that. But, again, to go back to the 80-15-5 principle, you can flip this however you want. But in the employee world, 80% of employees, they do just enough to not get fired. 5% of our employees are really, really those world changers. They're the ones that are complete bought into the culture, whatever you need to do, they're in. And the 15% are kind of a blend of the two. So essentially the 80-20 principle can come into play there. But here's what I'll say. We spend 80% of our time trying to keep the 80%ers, the ones that are just there for a paycheck, happy. And then we miss this whole grouping of the silent quitters that are like, they don't say anything. They're just kind of there watching. And, people that are A players, they don't want to be a part of a team with a bunch of B's and C's. And then they see the B's and C's getting away with murder. And here they are, wanting more out of life, wanting more opportunity, but they can't even get you to sit down and have a coffee with them because you're trying to keep, one of the knuckleheads from, smoking in a truck or whatever the case may be. We can talk about that a million different ways, but there's so much gold in that. So much gold in that. All right, Leroy.
We could have a 2-hour podcast on
seriously, dude. Like we don't give enough. Not enough
so
time
much
in the
fun.
world for this, but Leroy, same thing for you. What about you? A mistake where you've gotten comfortable, which kind of maybe led to some complacency. Why don't you touch on the customer side? Kory nailed the employee side. What about the customer side for you?
So the customer side, I guess for us would be, we've had several and we still have probably a couple that we keep them because we've always had them and they look good. They're the nice place on the corner. It's a place out by our house. Just as an example, we have a place that is literally just down the street from my house. I wouldn't say we lose money on it. We break even on it. So we lose money on it. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, because you should be somewhere else, by the way.
So we lose money on the account, but it looks immaculate every time I drive by the place. But they won't pay anymore. But I continue to keep it just because we drive by it. And I can't tell you how many times we have done that. And we still obviously continue to do that. I think it's about the only one that we have now. But man, it's so difficult to fire customers sometimes. And we have too, we've done business with friends, with friends' businesses, and man, I learned, Sam, we just don't do business with those people much anymore.
Yeah.
If somebody in my family wants something done, I'll refer them to Perfect Cut. I'll refer them to a different
anyone.
It's just because they want so much more out of us, and I've learned that as we've grown, they want more time from me, and I can't do that. And so it's taking time away from me. It's just become a huge, huge, huge distraction, I think. And so when we have some of those customers, we've had to learn to fire customers. And man, it's so difficult to fire customers, because Kory's been with us for 14 years, ever since we started our company. And
he's loyal.
Now we've raised his rates and he pays us every single month on time. And the thing, but we don't make any money doing it, but we're still doing that thing. And that's probably the best answer I can think of.
Real quick though, Leroy, like if you're doing that one place, I don't know what it is, and it looks good and you like it and it's by your house and it looks awesome, you can keep doing that as long as you know that this is a client that's just, we don't make much money on. It's when you don't, I think for our listeners, it's when you have those customers and you have too many of them and you don't know you're not making money. If you choose at the size you're at, and that as long as you've been in business, if you choose, to do your church and you decide to do it for free and you just feel good about it and it makes you feel warm and fuzzy, then mow your church for free. Sure, mow the Home Depot for free. For me, give away some products to some small guys that are just getting started for free.
We appreciate those mower blades, Kory. We're really, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Hey, you got to take care of the poor guys. But that's the thing, as long as you know it. But to your point, we did the same thing, man. We had the medical plaza and our blue trucks looked so good out front. And finally we're like, we're fucking losing so much money on this thing. Oh my
gosh, you guys are preaching right now.
It looked cool.
For me, that was Home Depot. That was Home Depot.
Yeah.
When we sold the Home Depot account, I remember it looked so cool driving by and I'd see the Atlas rig, parked out by the road at Home Depot. And I was always like, make sure everybody can see the trailer. And everybody would text and go, man, Sammy, your company's just growing like crazy. And then when we actually started to look at job costing, like it literally, we lost money to pull in the parking lot of that Home Depot. And so like looking back at it, there's so many, Kory, that is so good. Like when you've reached a certain size, if you want to do that, hey, the 80/20 rule applies. As long as 80% of your customers you're actually at least making some profit on, you can give away a little bit there too. I can unpack that for what were you going to say, Leroy?
I don't even remember there. I was just going to say,
It is. I was just thinking, dude, it's funny because I would tell you hit on. I would literally tell people where to park trucks because it so much mattered to me that you could see a blue truck. Like I didn't give a shit if we took care of the Home Depot, right? We did all the Targets in like 7 states or whatever. Like when we did all the local Targets, if we parked out back, we might as well not even mow it. Like it was, I needed every single mom and dad and kid that thought I was a loser and still does to see a blue truck sitting in front of the Target superstore.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
That was like, I literally made them park out front, flashers on. I mean, get as much attention, cones out, fucking clown dancing. I mean,
ego has driven my business. Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes
as owners, and this is something that I'll say, to those listeners that have that are still the chief rainmaker in the business, it's really, really easy to be emotionally attached to customers. We get emotionally attached to the first customer, emotionally attached to this residential, that when we quit doing residential snow and she texts us as the owner going, your office called and said, you're not doing residential snow. Do you have somebody you could refer me to? And we almost want to jump back in and go back, even though we know better. We just had that emotional attachment. And I will say this, now that we have, a full business development team and sales guys, and, they almost are like, they're savage. They don't get the emotional attachment like we do as owners. And when if they've got to raise prices because they've got to hit their metrics and accountabilities, like they're not going to be afraid to throw a price increase on something where, like for me, my office team, and I still have probably 15 contracts that are just my babies. And my office almost knows, they're like, hey, are we getting a new contract on such and such? Or are you just letting them keep the price the same as it's been for the last 5 years? And yeah, we're keeping it the same. Go ahead and keep them signed in, and
just keep it rolling.
keep it going. Looking back from some of the things that you guys have learned just from, stepping up, stepping out, is there anything that you guys would share? Not even so much, because there's going to be people listening to this that are in all different industries. So if you guys, they're not just lawn and landscape guys, but just into, multiple service industries, whatever. Is there anything, I mean, this stuff has just been gold, but is there something that's like a key takeaway lesson that you've learned? Just one thing, one piece of gold. Leroy, start with you. One piece of gold that you would share to that. Maybe that person is they're in the thick of it, right? They're still on the truck every single day, and they're just looking for that one tip that they're going to listen to this and go, oh my gosh, I needed to, Sam to say that, Leroy to say that, Kory to say that.
I think probably, boy, there's several of them, but I think probably the biggest one, if you're just a guy sitting on a lawnmower thinking about this and doing it, think about your vision and create that vision in your head of where you want to go. Be able to think about how you're going to delegate that someday. And the biggest thing is I would say, you've got to stay resilient with those goals. You've got to be able to see past your current season, I think, where you're at. So if you're sitting on a lawnmower right now or doing fall cleanups or getting ready to roll into winter, you should really be thinking about, spring, what your next summer, even what your next fall looks like, so you can be ahead of those things. And where are you going to need to be? What type of people are you going to need to get there? How are you going to get there? And then stay resilient with those goals. What are you looking at 5 years from now? What are you looking at 3 years from now? Continue to stay resilient with those, because you're going to get your ass kicked every single day or several days a week. And when you're a one-man show or a two-man show, when you're sitting on a lawnmower and it's 90 degrees out and you're getting your ass handed to you and your lawnmower breaks down, and then the next day your guy calls in, it's easy to just say, you know what, I'm going to go get a job somewhere. I'm going to sell my and go get it, man. Stay resilient with the thing. It's hard. It's extremely hard. And you're not going to build this overnight. I think so many guys get on and they see the success that, that I've built, that Kory's built, that you've built, Sam, because we're on the podcast or you're on
the Instagram
YouTube
success,
or whatever the hell the thing is. And man, know who you're listening to and just stay resilient with those goals. It does not happen overnight. It's year after year after year, brick by brick by brick.
Somebody told me once, a good mentor of mine, as we were going through like growing pains, and I found myself backing off or holding back on certain growth things because I was getting like resistance from, team members or whatever, or even like friends that are like, oh, it's not a good idea, whatever. And I found myself like adjusting my goals to suit the audience, right? I'm playing to the crowd. And I remember this person told me, I won't even mention his name, but he said to me, he said, Sam, never effing apologize for your vision. He's like, it's your vision. And honestly, as an owner, he said, it's all you got. That's all you have is that vision, and you should never be apologizing for it, never holding back on it. And I remembered hearing that, and man, I think I went to my office the next day and my shoulders were just a little bit higher up, and I'm like, you know what? If you don't like it, get the hell out. Like this is where we're going. I need people that are on the bus here that are wanting to take us to that next level. And like I think that that's probably like that point. Like that was probably my 20th time stepping out of my comfort zone, but I needed to hear that, like not lowering our goals to match the situation that we're in. So, man, that's gold, dude. Kory, what about you?
Oh man, so many things. I had some thoughts, and then you guys both said everything you guys say. I'm like, yeah, that, and then that.
That right there. That right there. That's
My
what's
Afro
trouble
comment,
with three of us on here,
yeah.
man.
My harsh comment would be lead or get out of the way. But the truth is, not everybody knows how to lead, and it doesn't mean you have to be the best leader to run a successful company. And what is success to you? I don't know. It could be that you want to take care of your family and you want to have two crews. It could be that you want to be 5 million, 10 million, whatever that is. So I can't define your success for you, but I do think that LeRoy was kind of just bouncing, but his thoughts were exactly like, what's the game plan? Stick to the fucking plan. It's going to be hard. And I think you said something earlier in the podcast, you got three guys and one quits and they just jump back in the truck and they're back in the field. No, we're not. We're going to hire to replace, and we're going to keep. What was the plan? The plan was that we're going to have 3 crews or 4 crews. And I think it's so easy for guys to sidetrack. And I say this a lot on the podcast, but just old school. You can write it down. Where am I at today? Where do I want to be in 12, 24, 36 months? What am I, what's going to get in the way? Kind of what are my roadblocks? What are my hurdles? How much capital do I need? What type of equipment would I need? How many people would I need? What kind of marketing would that take? What does that look like? Or what type of customers would I need to get to this goal? And it's not always just financial. I think a lot of times people are like, I got to get to 1 million.
Yeah.
Like, why? Says who? Maybe maybe you could just be crazy profitable at 650.
Yeah.
I'll be so happy if I get to 1 million. Will you? Because what if you don't make any money? And so, you
just wrote our next 5 podcasts. So just so you know, 2025, we've already got every episode written already.
When you're going to need you on once a month, Sam. But yeah, so I mean, I just think, it's business is tough, and it's supposed to be tough. And I'm glad it's tough. We'd have more competition, but the guys that work the hardest and figure it out, but you've got to, and again, let me back up, not just work the hardest, you've got to work smart as well. And you've got to surround yourself with great people. I'm not brilliant by any means. Here, I tell you that here. I mean, but I surround myself with really, really good people. I'm really good at what I do in certain aspects. I'm really good at that.
You don't need to be a world-class leader, though. Kory, LeRoy, you guys will relate to this. You don't need to be good at 20 things. You don't need to have it all figured out. You only need to be really, really good at 1 or 2 things, and then just double down on them and let everything else fall into place from there. Like I've done 100 things wrong, but I've done 1 or 2 things really, really good. And that's where I try to put my energy. And so many people that are up and coming leaders, they always want to focus on their weaknesses because they're so much louder than their strengths. But here's the thing. You didn't build Brilliant Borders, Atlas, or Perfect Cut or Ballard products because of your weaknesses. You built it because of your strengths. So why are you so hyper-focused on fixing your weaknesses instead of just doubling down on what your strengths are? And so I share this when I do talks to home service and landscape companies. I have a chart that I share. It's a PowerPoint slide, and it's basically, what is my value? What is my time worth? And, when you think about those days when you're that owner operator and you go jump back on the mower because your guy, called in today, right? So it's, you do what you're used to doing. you jump back on the machine and you go out and cut grass all day. And let's just say, for the sake of easy math, it's a $20 an hour role. You essentially just valued your time at $200 for that day. So people will argue back and say, well, if I didn't do that, how are my customers' lawns supposed to get cut? You know what? Figure it out tomorrow. Take that time today to go to the gas stations, go to the truck stops, go to Home Depot, and work on recruiting and finding a replacement, because they're not just going to come to you. So that's we go back to that comfort point, and we just get stupid because we think that it's going to the problems are just going to magically go away. And then what we're going to do? We're going to go into all the Facebook groups and we're going to complain about nobody wants to work. All these people, they
everybody's
want jobs,
lazy.
but nobody. And what value does that add to your leadership? What value does that add to your organization? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay. I want to stay on focus here. I got this has been incredible. And again, next year, all the episodes, we got to talk about 80-20 principle, working on all the things.
Who's your guest? Sam Gamble is on every week.
I want to make sure we don't miss this.
Yeah.
Don't miss this. And guys, don't hold back, because it's really easy to tell our listeners what we think they want to hear, not what they need to hear. So don't hold back on this response. LeRoy, I'm going to start with you. What do you think a leader stands to lose if they keep playing it safe and cozy? What do they stand to lose?
Boy, they're going to lose their business at some point. You're going to lose your dream. And most importantly, you're going to lose respect. You're going to lose impact. You're going to lose relevance. You're going to lose a lot of respect for your team. If you're playing it safe and cozy, because you're not going to have much of a team. They're going to continue to move. And the biggest thing is if you continue to play it safe and cozy, you're just stalling your growth. You're stalling your professional growth. Yeah. And when you're stalling your professional growth, you're stalling your team. And I look at it today that, we have 20 some team members working for us. Those 20 some team members, a majority of those go home to a wife or to a husband. They have children that are growing. And that's a huge thing. And I believe that I have to continue to have professional growth, personal growth, so I can be a better leader for that team. And if I don't, I'm going to lose a ton of respect from those guys. And when I start to lose respect from our team, I think we go completely down the wrong road. And we're going to lose the vision that I have created in my head where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years.
You get that. What are you going to do about it, team? Because now they know that they have something on you and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you can develop that, like, I don't want to say, I don't give an F mindset as a leader, but like when that you're putting your best foot forward every day and you're pushing yourself to get comfortable being uncomfortable. If somebody like comes to you and goes, well, if I don't get a raise, then I'm leaving. But like, well, you're not performing at the level where we can afford to pay you a raise, because I know my numbers and I know where you're hitting at. We've been talking about your production metrics and your attitude and your punctuality and how dirty your truck is. And you know what? If you want to leave, then I actually think this is a good time for us to separate. But if you're comfortable, you'll find yourself, oh, don't leave. I'll give you $1 an hour raise. Not because that person's worth it, but because you don't want to go back to being in that point where now you got to go out and try to hire somebody else. And I mean, there's so much to unpack there with, like you said, giving up on your dreams. And like, it's not just, you're not just hurting the team member. It's what's the multiplication with that from their family, to that family, the kids, the whole nine. And what about the A player that's looking at seeing you comfortable with this C player, that now you're going to lose them too. So you're going to always end up being the other guy on the other side of this podcast. I've had 100 employees over the last 5 years. None of them have worked out. And, the symptom is, hey, people are lazy, but the root is they just don't want to work for you. I mean, honestly, like there's so much to unpack there. Yeah, Kory, what about you?
I wrote something down, and then as we were talking, I just, a thought is either build your dream or you're going to build somebody else's. So for me, it's just, if you're not going to do the things that you say you're going to do and you're not committed to them, you're going to find yourself working for somebody else. And that's not all bad. Not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone needs and wants that kind of pressure. And that doesn't mean they're not a high quality individual. We have amazing people working at all of our companies that I love and that are awesome, but that doesn't mean that they should own the company. So,
Amen.
and what is your freedom worth? I've asked LeRoy on this podcast a couple times when him and I've just had some, and it's like, and we've had some high quality people on here. Nobody ever mentions how much money they make, LeRoy.
No, I don't think.
When I ask you what's the most valuable thing you have,
Time, freedom.
time and freedom. And I'm in freedom. He doesn't say, "Oh, my salary is pretty sweet." I mean, hopefully it is, right? He wants to be able to take his family on vacation. He wants to go watch the Bengals get beat. That's fine. But I had to throw that in there. But like, it's freedom, man. Are you willing to like put it all? I mean, you willing to give it all up and, and maybe punch a clock and that again, I don't want anybody listening to this that's punching a clock or riding a lawnmower right now thinking he's an asshole. Dude, I worked in the field. It sucked. I made no money for 15 years. I mean, no money.
You just wrote our March episode on what's your time worth, and time is the only resource that we have at our disposal. That's a finite resource, but yet it's the number one thing that we don't value the most, right? We just like waste it on so many things, and so what is your time worth?
They say all the time, and even I'll just quickly in the Ballard side, people are like, well, I can make one of those on a Saturday for nothing, and I always say, well, but you gave up your Saturday when you could have taken your kids to the park or spent time with your family or whatever. But when you tell me that you did it for free, or in the lawn care business, hey, I didn't have to charge a customer because I did it myself.
Oh my gosh. Preach it, Pastor Kory.
You're the owner of the company. You should be making $200 an hour.
Right.
So you went out on a Saturday and you cleaned up the hedges and pulled some weeds and spot sprayed it, but you didn't charge them because you did it yourself. And and I'm like, man, you're the most expensive commodity in this company. And it's free.
We could literally just drop the mic right there on that note. Like literally. All right. For the sake of time, guys, and we haven't gotten to the lightning round yet, but this will be really, really quick. We're going to have a little bit of fun as we tie a bow on this podcast. Are you guys ready for this? You guys didn't even know this was coming. So go ahead, crack your knuckles. All right. You ready, Kory? I'm going to start with you.
Whatever.
Rumor has it, Kory, you're big into fitness. You like to work out, do a little bit. What's your favorite cheat meal?
Ben and Jerry's.
Ben and Jerry's ice cream. I would have not thought that. That's good. That's good. LeRoy, what's your biggest leadership pet peeve?
Leaders who are late. Can't stand it.
If any of your employees listen to this, you're driving LeRoy crazy if you're late. That's good. Kory, what's one thing about you that either an employee, past employee from Perfect Cut, somebody from Ballard Products, or any of the thousands of listeners that are going to hear this podcast, what's one thing about you that people don't know?
That's tough. Probably that I'm less confident than I act.
Ooh.
I have more fear than I should.
Dude, that's powerful. Thank you for getting vulnerable and transparent on that. Ooh, that's good. LeRoy, what is your favorite leadership book that you've ever read that was applicable to your leadership?
Good to Great.
Good to Great.
That is a really, really good book. I use the hedgehog concept all the time. The 3 circles, passionate, can you be the best, and can you make money doing it? Those 3 things
that book changed our business.
Good to Great. That's a really, really good one. Kory, ooh, this is a deep one again. I'm not letting up on you. What is the best advice you've ever received from somebody?
Oh my God. How much time do we got? Boys, Sam, I don't know. I've received a lot. I have an answer here because it changed my motivation my entire life. My senior year when I wasn't paying attention in high school, a guy said, Kory, either pay attention or you'll be mowing grass your entire life. So I said that was not advice. Well, he was giving me advice that I needed to pay attention in history class or I would be cutting grass my entire life. And it made such an impact on me. I know his name. He's since passed away, but I've probably told that story 500 times. And so it put a chip on my shoulder and it put motivation. And I remember thinking as I was adding crew 4 and 5 and 6 and 10, I wonder if he sees my blue trucks. And he's a school.
Oh, yes.
He probably
yes.
has he probably has no effing clue. But I think he did because I was a pretty big story in Ankeny. Not bragging, kind of am. But in Ankeny, I mean, at the time, it was kind of blowing up. And I remember, so not advice, but he said something to me that was so impactful that I'm like, I'm going to show him and everybody else that made fun of me. I remember my high school sweetheart going off to college and all her friends like, your boyfriend mows grass. They were making fun of me.
That's gold. That's gold.
Now, fuckers.
All right, last one, Leroy's for you. What is one leadership trait that you think is a must utilize to be a successful leader? One trait.
One trait that a leader has to have, I would say honesty.
That was exactly
Honesty. I think that's great. I think you can, it's one thing that eventually you can lie your way to so many different things, but eventually
you're wading through a lot of stuff through life. Eventually you're going to figure it out.
Oh my gosh, guys, this has been like serious gold. I mean, I've taken away. I can't wait to watch the recording of this and go back to some of those notes, even back to that. You'll be hearing this in a talk one day about, pay attention or you'll be cutting the grass the rest of your life. All right, I'll show you. I'll be cutting grass the rest of my life. All right. Oh man, that's gold. Well, I will say to everybody watching the Green Grind, watching Culture Proof, that every single thing in your life will change when you choose to step out of that comfort zone. And you just have to know that there's no looking back. Once you outgrow any role in the company, whatever it is, if you outgrow it if you can prove that you don't have to do a certain role in the business, whatever it is, working, on the lawnmower, working, being the admin person, answering the phone, working as the mechanic, whatever it is. If for 1 week somebody else has assumed ownership of that role, you can never go back to it. You can never go back, because every time you do, there's going to be this chip on your shoulder that like, what am I doing? I'm parked in the wrong parking spot here. And I think everything will change as the people watching this, listening to it, everything will change when you choose to step out of your comfort zone.
Wow. Fantastic.
Sam, thanks for being on our show today, man. Every time you're on here, our ratings go through the roof just because you're so well spoken. And I truly just myself appreciate all you do for not only our industry, but for everybody out there. And you're just a good dude. And I'm extremely grateful for Brian that our paths crossed, here a year ago.
Likewise.
For sure. And I appreciate you being on. And Sam, where can our listeners find you? Because you do some amazing stuff, and not only speaking everywhere and helping guys, but you also do some, I think, private coaching as well. How do they find you? Website, Instagram, Facebook, where do they get a hold of you, bud?
You know what? It can all start at samgimbel.com. Just last name GEMBEL, samgimbel.com. Who would have thought that one day I'd have a website with my name? But you can access my Calendly there to book a call or whatever. And it really is, people invested at least bits and pieces of me over my journey. So you know what? I just feel like it's my stewardship to be able to give back to our industry. So that's why when an opportunity comes on to add value, what stuff, collaborating on stuff like this, dude, I'm all in, man. I'm all in.
Yeah, dude, this has been probably the most fun episode I've had, and I appreciate you bringing it to Leroy and I, because we that was tough, and I think hopefully our listeners got a lot of value out of that, and everything that we shared back and forth. And Sam, we really appreciate you being on. And guys, this is going to air on obviously you're listening to the Green Grind, but it's also going to be on Culture Proof, the podcast. So Sam, we'll figure out how we're going to show that. I don't know. We'll make sure that when we put the link, guys, below, that you can go back to both episodes, because you've got another intro and some other stuff that you'll also be sharing as well. So hopefully you guys, if you're not listening to his podcast, jump on that one. And Sam's going to also have just constant great information. And we drop a new episode of the Green Grind every Tuesday. So we appreciate all the support, and Jobber and ProTiv for backing us on that. What else we got?
I think that's it. Sam, thanks again so much. Really appreciate you being on, man.
Likewise, guys. Take care, brother. See ya.
See ya.
All right, buddy. That's a wrap.